Hi everyone, so today our lesson was about solving quadratics by factoring. So this kind of throws us back to a little bit before Christmas, and then this also, we talk about the zero product property that we learned yesterday. Okay, so two things that we've already learned, and now we're just going to put them together. All right, so the first thing that is super important is remembering standard form. So in this case, our standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. And in this case, something's a little bit different, and that is because now we are seeing it equal to 0. Okay, so when we are solving by factoring, it's important that everything is equal to 0. So we want to see our equation in standard form, but also equal to 0. Okay? Then we are also going to use factoring, okay? And that is what we learned before Christmas when we had a equals 1, or a is greater than 1. So that's another important thing that we already learned that we're going to be using. And I told you guys, a couple weeks ago that it's important to know factoring, because if you don't know factoring, you're not going to be able to know much of Algebra 2. That's so important. That's a really vital thing. And then lastly is the use of the zero product property, which we used yesterday. And what the zero product property is just setting both of our parentheses after we factor equal to 0. Okay? So my three major steps here, I'm going to slide over. You guys can write them down. So steps, okay? Step 1 is to make sure the quadratic or the equation, whatever you want to call it, is in standard form and equal to 0. So it should look like so. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 will be to factor. And here we learned factoring when a is equal to 1 and when a is greater than 1. So those are the two different ways of factoring that we learned, okay? And then lastly is step 3, which is the use of the zero product property. And all this means is to set both parentheses, so this is after you factor, equal to 0, and then solve. So those are our three major steps, okay? So go ahead and write those down. Pause the video, write them down, and then come back, okay? So now that you are back, I'm going to go ahead and move over to the example, okay? So here is where we have our quadratic, the equation that we're going to be working with. So y equals x squared minus x minus 2, I'm sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down here. Okay, so y equals x squared minus x minus 2. So the first thing I'm going to ask myself is this in standard form? Yes, it is in standard form. But what's super important is to realize that we need to make y 0, okay? And if you guys remember from yesterday when I went over the definitions with you all on x-intercepts and solutions and those 4 words that all meant the same thing, one of the major things was that y is always 0. So because I know that y is always 0, I'm going to go ahead and change y to 0. So 0 equals x squared minus x minus 2. So now that we're here, we're going to go ahead and factor. Okay, so remember, when how we factor is we're going to list a, b, and c. Okay, so I'm going to say a equals 1, b equals -1, and c equals -2. And that is all based off of standard form. Okay, so now that I have my a, b, and c labeled, what I need to do in order to factor is multiply a times c. So in this case, a times c is -2. So remember, when I have a negative a times c, I have to list both set of factors. By both set of factors, I mean 1 and -2 and -1 and +2. Okay? And now I'm going to look at those two sets of factors here, and I need to see which one of those adds up to give me b. And in this case, b is -1. Okay? So I need to find the factor that adds up to give me -1. And in this case, the first one, 1 and -2, are going to be used to get -1. Because when you add 1 and -2, you get -1. So remember, this is a little tip. When we learned when A is 1, when we're factoring, you can just write parentheses and add the x in front. So this is something we already learned, okay? And we can't forget to make this equal to 0 still, okay? Now that we're here, what we're going to do is we're just going to add our factors that we chose. So it's a +1 and it's a -2. Okay? So when A equals 1, we can just do that. You don't need to group. You don't need to do the big X. You can just see that we're going to plug them right in. Okay? Then we get here, and this is the zero product property, what we learned yesterday. And remember, the step of the zero product property is set both of the parentheses that you have equal to 0 and solve. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to set x plus 1 equal to 0 and x minus 2 equal to 0. Okay? And then I'm just going to go ahead and solve. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. These cancel, and my answer is x equals -1. I'm then going to add to both sides, okay, because I need to get x by itself. My 2's will cancel, and x equals 2. So these two, x equals -1 and x equals 2, are your answer. And that is how we solve quadratics by factoring, okay? We're going to go through 4 more and really kind of pound these, pound these out, pound them in, whatever you want to say, okay? So step 1, we're going to go ahead and go to the example. Step 1 is to make sure that this is in standard form. This is, in fact, in standard form, so we can go ahead right away and solve, okay? So what we are going to do is do our A, okay? A equals, B equals, and C equals, okay? So A equals 1, B equals 6, and C equals 5, okay? So now that we have this, we can go ahead and multiply A times C. So in this case, A times C is 5, okay? Now that we have a positive A times C and a positive B, all we need to do is list your positive factors. And when we're working with 5, we know that there's only one set of factors, and that's 1 and 5, okay? And they only have to be positive because our B is positive. So as we know, we're going to choose 1 and 5 because that's the only option we can choose. And remember, when A is 1, we're just going to write our parentheses, okay? The X is going to go in front, and then you're going to fill in with your factoring pairs. So X plus 1, X plus 5, and here we can't forget to equal it to 0, okay? Then, now here is where we are at the zero product property. Okay, so I'm at my zero product property. And what the zero product property states is that I can set x plus 1 to 0 and x plus 5 to 0 and then solve. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and solve this. So when I'm solving x plus 1 equals 0, I need to get x by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1 from both sides. These will cancel, and I'm left with x equals -1. I'm going to do the same steps on x plus 5. I'm just going to subtract 5 from both sides, cancel these out, and x equals -5. Okay? All right, so those are your 2 solutions for letter B. Sorry, give me 1 second. All right, then so that's your answer for that one, okay? So those ones are super simple. You don't have to group here. Remember, with A, you don't have to group because A is 1, all right? If you have to, you can. It will still work out. All right, over to B, okay? Now, we are going to do the same thing, but it's a little different now because A is not 1, all right? So my first step is to make sure it's in standard form. It is, okay? And then what you're going to do, now that it is, you can go ahead and list A, B, and C. So A in this case is 4, B is 4, and C is -24, okay? So now that we're here, we're going to go ahead and, sorry, give me 1 second. We're going to go ahead and multiply A times C, okay? So A times C is 96, because that's negative 96, I'm sorry, because 4 times 24 is negative 96. And then what you're going to do, because now we have a negative a times c, you need to list all of the factors. So all the factors include negative 1 and 96, and then 1 and negative 96. That's what I mean by listing all of the factors. Then we're going to have negative 2 and 48, and 2 and negative 48. And then negative 3 and 32, and 3 and negative 32. And then negative 4 and 24, and 4 and negative 24. And then negative 6 and 16, and 6 and negative 16. And then negative 8 and 12, and 8 and negative 12. Okay? Excuse me. So now that we found all of our factor pairs, we need to choose which one of those adds up to get me a positive 4, because that is my B, okay? So this factor pair adds up to give me positive 4, okay? Now that A is not 1, we need to substitute those pairs back into the original problem. So I'm going to go ahead and write 4x squared, and then I'm going to substitute back in negative 8x plus 12x minus 24, and it's important to keep that equal 0, okay? So in red, you can see where I put our factors. I wrote them in red, and I substituted that in for 4x, all right? Now what I'm going to do is group, okay? So I'm grouping. Now in the first group, I need to factor out a GCF, and my GCF of 4 and 8 is 4. Okay, because 4 fits into those numbers evenly. That's the greatest common factor. But both terms also have an x, so I'm going to take out an x. All right, and now I need to find what goes inside of my parentheses. I need to find what I need to multiply 4x by to get 4x squared. And I know that's got to be x, because 4x times x is x squared. Then I need to find out which number I need to multiply 4x by to get negative 8x. And I know that all I need is the negative 2. Okay, so that is group 1. I'm done. Okay, now I'm going to go on to group 2. I need to find my greatest common factor of 12 and negative 24. So my GCF is 12 because 12 fits evenly into those numbers. And now both terms do not have an x, so I can't bring an x out. Okay, so what do I need to multiply 12 by to get 12x? That's simple, just x. And what do I need to multiply 12 by to get negative 24, which is also simple, and that's just negative 2. Okay? And end my parentheses, and you can't forget to have that 0. That 0 needs to be there. All right? Now that both of our parentheses match here, this is just what we worked on before Christmas, okay? I can go ahead and write my parentheses as so. So I'm writing the pair that matches, and then I'm writing the outside term. So this goes here, and this goes here. And then I can't forget to set it equal to 0. And at this point right here, I have the zero product property. And what we just learned with the zero product property is that you could set both of the parentheses to 0 when you have the zero product property, okay? And then what you're going to do is solve. So for the first one, we're just going to add 2 to both sides, right? These 2's cancel out, and you're left with x equals 2. Now, on the other side, that is a two-step equation, okay? So your first thing that you have to do is subtract 12 from both sides. These will cancel out, and you're left with 4x equals negative 12. All right? Then, in order to get x by itself, you still have to divide each side by 4, and x will equal negative 3, because negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. And then x minus 2 and x equals 2 and x equals negative 3 are your answers for this problem. All right? I'm going to go ahead and move on to C. So if you need more help on that, pause and look what I did. Or, rewind and go back. All right, so now I am on to letter C. Now here, I am not in standard form, so I cannot solve this yet. All right, this does not look like this. That does not look like that. So the first thing I need to do is get that 3 to the other side. I need a 0 there. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 3 from both sides, okay? So then I will have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, and these cancel out, or in other words, they make 0, okay? So now I have standard form, right? So now I'm all set. Now that I'm in standard form, I can go ahead and start solving. So my first step is to go ahead and write down A, B, and C. So A is 2, B is -5, and C is -6. I'm sorry, -3. I jumped the gun. All right, so now that I have A, B, and C, I need to go ahead and multiply A times C, which in this case gives me a -6. Now, when we have a negative A times C, you have to write down all the pairs. What I mean by that is 1, -6, -1, 6. 2, -3, -2, 3. And those are all my factor pairs of -6, okay? Now, I need to look at my factor pairs and see which one of these adds up to give me a -5, okay? In this case, 1 and -6 will get me a -5. So now that I've chosen my factors, I'm going to go ahead and plug them back in. So 2x squared minus 1x, plus 1x, minus 6x, minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so I put the factors that I chose in blue, so that's easier for you guys to see. Then my next step is to go ahead and group. So I'm grouping the first one. Now, here, you have to be careful because you're looking for the GCF. It's very easy to say that the GCF is 2, but we can't do that, okay? You know that 1 does not divide, you can't divide 1 by 2 and get a whole number. So my GCF here is a 1. Now, they both have an x, okay? So you also need to take out an x. All right? So now that we have our GCF factored out, we need to find what we need to multiply 1x by to get 2x squared. And I know that I definitely need a 2, and I also know that I have to multiply by an x as well, because 1x times 2x gives me 2x squared, okay? Then I need to figure out what I need to multiply 1x by to get 1x, and that's easy. It's just a 1, all right? Now we're going to go ahead and look at group 2, all right? What is my GCF? Well, first, I see that both numbers have a negative, so immediately I know that I need to factor out a negative, okay? So once I do that, I'm going to factor that out, and then I'm going to ask myself, what is my GCF here? Okay, and be careful here again. I know you're going to want to say 6, but it's not, okay? The biggest numbers that factor into 6 and 3 is 3, okay? So I'm going to take out a -3 here. Then I need to figure out what I need to multiply a -3 by to get a -6x, all right? And I know that I need to multiply a -3 times 2 to get me a -6, but I also have to remember that I have to keep an x in there, okay? Then I need to figure out what I need to multiply -3 by to get -3. And we know to keep the same number, I just need to multiply by a +1. And then we can't forget to have a 0 there, all right? So once our parentheses match, we know that we can go ahead and just write the matching parenthesis in one, and then take your outside terms and write it in the other. Now, I wrote an x here and not a 1x, okay? That 1 could be imaginary. That 1 really doesn't matter, okay? It's there, but it's not there. So I'm going to keep it this way because as we get into higher level math, that's what we begin to do, all right? So here, we are set, and we have the zero product property, okay? So what the zero product property means is I could set both of those parentheses equal to 0, and then I can solve to get my answers, okay? So on this first side, I'm going to subtract 1 first from both sides. These ones will cancel out, and I am left with 2x equals -1. All right? Then I need to go ahead and divide each side by 2 to get rid of those 2's and get x on its own. So my answer here is x equals -1/2. Okay, so that's one of my answers. Then I'm going to go to the other parenthesis that I said equal to 0, and this one's only a 1 step, so I just need to add 3 to both sides to get x by itself. And on this side, x equals 3. So that is my other solution. All right? I'm going to go ahead and go on to letter D. If you need to slow down, go ahead and pause and rewatch that part, okay? All right, letter D. Okay, so step 1 for D is to get this into standard form. Obviously, this looks nothing like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That looks nothing like that, okay? So what I need to do is I need to find a way to get that 14x and that -2 to the other side of this problem, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and subtract 14 because I need to do the opposite operation, all right? So this will cancel out, and I'm going to bring -14x over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the 6x squared, and then 1x minus 14x gives me a -13x, and then I'm still set to -2 over here. This still does not look like standard form, all right? So I need to take one more step, and that is to add 2 to both sides, all right? So now I have 6x squared minus 13x plus 2, and we can't forget to equal to 0, all right? So now we are in standard form. All right, now that we're in standard form, what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and label A, B, and C. So here, I'm just going to do it on the side over here. A, so this goes here. A equals 6, B equals -13, and C equals a +2. So once I'm at this point, I can go ahead and then multiply 6 times 2, which gives me a +12. All right, so once I get here, I can go ahead and find my factors of 12. Now, it's important, oops, I forgot to the -13 there. It's important to realize now that we have a positive A times C, which is a +12, and a negative B, I need to realize, like the hint I gave you guys last time, I have to realize in my head that I only have to list the negative numbers, the negative factors. So the negative factors of 12 include -1, -12, -2, -6, and -3 and -4. All right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at those factors and see which one of those adds up to give me a -13, because that's my B. And it's pretty obvious that it's the first one. Okay? So now that I've picked my factors, I need to go ahead and plug them back into my original quadratic. So 6x squared, I'm going to use the 12 first, okay? So I'm going to go and put this in a different color. -12x, -1x, plus 2 equals 0. Don't forget, always keep that 0, all right? Then what I need to do is go ahead and group. So I'm grouping the first one together, and I'm finding what my GCF is here, my greatest common factor. So I know that 6 is my greatest common factor because it goes into 6 and 12 evenly. So I'm going to go ahead and take a 6 out. I'm also looking at my group and noticing that both of these have an x, okay? So I'm going to pull out my x. Now I have my GCF. So I need to figure out what I need to multiply 6x by in order to get 6x squared. And in my head, I know that I just need another x, okay? Then I need to figure out what I need to multiply 6x by to get a -12, and that is -2. All right? So my first grouping is done. Now I need to go ahead and do my second grouping. And here, be careful with your GCF. First, notice that there's a negative in front, so you can immediately take out that negative, okay? And notice, this is another one of those tricks. 2 is not your GCF here, okay? You have to realize that you cannot do 1 divided by 2, okay? So my GCF is just a 1. Then I need to figure out what I need to multiply -1 by to get a -1x, and all that's missing is the x, so I'm going to put that there. Then in my head, I need to figure out what I need to multiply -1 by to get a +2. Remember, a negative times a negative gives you a positive, so it's going to be a -2. Can't forget to keep my 0 there, all right? So now that I realize that both of my parentheses are the same, I can go ahead and write them as so, with just keeping your matching pair as 1, and then taking the outside terms and making the other. Don't forget, equal to 0, okay? Now we're here, and this is the 0 product property, okay? And what the 0 product property states is that I can set both of my parentheses to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and set x minus 2 to 0 and 6x minus 1 to 0, all right? And then in order to solve, I'm going to add 2 to both sides, add 2. My 2's cancel out, x equals 2. All right, and then I'm going to go to the other side. I need to add 1 to both sides. That's my first step. Those cancel out, 6x equals 1. And then what I need to do is I need to divide by 6 on both sides. And these 6's cancel out, and x equals 1 over 6. So that is my solution. Those are my 2 solutions to this. All right, so those are your examples that I'm doing with you. All right, and then what you're going to do for homework, you're going to bounce over, and you are going to do these 10 problems. So 7, 8, and 9 are like letter A, and then 10 through 16 are all like B, C, and D. All right. Always make sure you need to be in standard form before you do anything. All right. You can email or text me with any questions. Have a nice day. This is due by 9 p.m. and then by 9 p.m. I'm gonna give you guys the answers. All right. Bye.